Every year we enter the new NBA season with predictions, expectations, hopes, and dreams of what might go down, and based on data, film, rumors, and reports, we can typically make an educated guess on how things will be different moving forward. One of the biggest examples of this is how people like to predict which players will be due for a big breakout season, and there are always a few players that the masses can agree on being prime candidates for this, but those players don't always come through. This brings us to today's video, where we'll be discussing 4 players in particular that many were expecting to see break out this season, but for a variety of reasons, they just have not been able to do so. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but it also very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player we all expected to break out this season but failed to do so is Jonathan Kuminga of the Golden State Warriors. Coming into the year, the Warriors lost Klay Thompson to free agency, and their roster was left with a lot of question marks. Steph Curry still has a few great years left in him leading the way, but after him, it was very difficult to figure out who would step up and be the team's number 2 in the pecking order, and based on a combination of talent, potential, and previous flashes, many believe Jonathan Kuminga was going to be the player that emerged as their elite number 2 option, and he could have potentially even been a star in the making. Now, technically, Kuminga is the team's second leading scorer this year, but when you think about a guy breaking out and taking a leap and expect more consistency, you expect more discipline, you expect a noticeable boost in their production, and none of those things really apply to Kuminga at all here. For one, he and Andrew Wiggins are basically sharing duties as the second option, both averaging about 17 points per game. Kuminga is also still largely the team's 6th man, having started just 10 games this year, because despite his scoring output, he can't seem to earn Coach Steve Kerr's trust to be more heavily featured because of his mental lapses on defense and his occasional tendency to be a bit lazy. He'll have games where he scores over 30 points, reeling everybody in, getting you to buy back in on his potential, and then the next game he'll have 11 points, trying to do too much, taking bad shots, and with this being the 4th season of his career now, you would have liked to have seen some of those bad habits be shaken. He's still an unbelievably talented young player, he's still objectively quite productive, but many were definitely expecting more from him, and if he was able to give more, the Warriors would probably be having a better season than they are. The next player that has failed to break out despite tons of preseason expectations to do so is Jalen Green of the Houston Rockets. The Jalen Green experience has been a wild roller coaster ride throughout his career, with ridiculously high highs, but even more frustratingly inconsistent lows. Green was drafted 2nd overall in the 2021 NBA draft, hyped up to be one of the next great scoring talents at the shooting guard position, and while he definitely has a ton of talent on the offensive end, he simply cannot be trusted to be a true star in the league. Last season, he closed the year out on an absolute heater, putting up quite a few 30 and 40 point games to close out the season, while the Rockets were nearly making a comeback at the end of the year to snag a spot in the play-in tournament, which naturally led to Green turning a lot of heads and being a prime breakout candidate as someone who could have carried that momentum he built into this season. That, however, has not happened. Jalen Green has always had insanely promising moments throughout his career, but he has largely been an erratic shooter of the ball who takes a ton of bad shots, struggles to convert efficiently, he's been a defensive liability, and his decision-making often leaves a lot to be desired. This year he's averaging about 20 points per game, which is right around the same mark he's been putting up for the last 3 years, and he's making just 41% of his shots and 32% of his threes, which is actually worse than he's ever shot from both the field and from 3. So in the important categories, he's regressing, and in the other areas, he's not taking nearly enough of a leap, if any, to be able to say that he's been living up to that preseason hype. The next player that failed to break out this year after being pegged by many as a prime candidate to do so is Josh Giddey of the Chicago Bulls. Giddey's been in a bit of a controversial figure in the NBA over the last 2 years, but strictly focusing on the basketball side of things, it became very apparent that his skill set was not going to be able to be maximized while he was in Oklahoma City next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and when the Thunder traded him to Chicago, who were definitely a group in desperate need of playmaking in their backcourt, the fit seemed incredibly ideal. He's been the team's starting point guard all year long, there's less pressure on him being now on a group with one eye peeking out the window at a tank coming in the horizon, and he's had every opportunity to be more heavily featured, yet he too has essentially been the same player that he's always been, while disappointingly regressing in some key areas. Giddey is putting up a career low 12 points per game, still struggling to find ways to be consistently effective as a scorer because of the fact that he's a below average 3-point shooter, and he's just not the most creative ball handler, typically keeping things simple and basic, which can be good in terms of playing smart and safe, but it's uninspiring when that basically limits you to being a role player while also needing to be a primary ball handler to even be effective. He's a big guard who grabs a lot of rebounds for the position, and he dishes out about 7 assists per game, but being in a new position and still struggling to be a standout performer 4 years into his career leads us to believe that he just is what he is at this point. And finally, the last player that failed to break out after entering the year in prime position to do so is Mark Williams of the Charlotte Hornets. Mark Williams was a lottery pick back in 2022, coming into the Hornets squad that hasn't really had a real answer at the center position in quite some time. He's a towering 7-footer with impressively explosive athleticism for a guy his size. Defensively, he's very sound with very real and natural shot blocking and rim protecting abilities, and he provides the skill set of a modern-day rim-running big man who operates the pick and roll well, knows not to take bad shots on offense, and converts efficiently around the rim. The issue, though, is that he just has not been able to stay healthy, which has set him back quite a bit. The hope was that this year would be different and that he would flourish playing off of all-star LaMelo Ball's playmaking prowess, but he's once again missed a significant amount of time due to injuries, and in the 12 games that he has played this season, he's not really taking any kind of noticeable strides. Everything that I said about him in the beginning of this segment is still true. He just doesn't impose himself in those ways nearly as much as a guy with his talent should be, as he's putting up about 12 points and 8 rebounds per game, both of which are down from his numbers last season. The Hornets still don't have a better option at center than him, so there's no reason for him not to be grabbing this opportunity and running with it, but instead, he's failing to really stand out. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which players you expected to break out this season. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.